Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. Happy Sunday. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for doing my survey yesterday. When I said I was tied up, some people literally thought that I was physically tied up. They were concerned about my safety. I thought that was quite funny. I'm well. I was just a little busy with other things. All right, it feels great to do a live stream on Sunday morning. It really feels great. I'm more energetic in the mornings. All right, let's get started. What a topic we have picked for ourselves. Based on the survey, you guys are really interested in what's happening in China in terms of social movements. Um, so we're going to answer the question. So the question is why the CCP downfall is imminent. Well, the answers are one, student revolt, and two, business resistance. I said in my post yesterday that I really get the sense that the CCP regime won't be around for a long time uh, because a few transformative events have occurred. The first is that in the past week, not even past weeks, in the past week, Chinese students are getting organized to send a message, which is that it's time to end the CCP regime. Secondly, local governments' bad policies have given people the chance to effectively disable their government. And this is also unprecedented. Both events indicate the beginning of the CCP's downfall. So today I will first talk about the Chinese students' movement to overthrow the CCP and then the CCP's response. And then I'll talk about why I say the local governments are being disabled by the people. And then I'll give you an update on Xi Jinping's status in the power struggle, because we've been saying that his power has been weakened. So many of you want to know where he stands or what's happening in the leadership compound in Zhongnanhai. So that's the program today. All right, let's get started. Now, for the past 2 years, protests over back pay, failed investments, or undelivered real estate have become a daily occurrence across China. Every day, you're going to see protests of various scale breaking out in China. Most of these protests have been financial, economic in nature. However, things have shifted in the last week as Chinese students have begun protesting with a clear political message. Now let's revisit what has happened in the last week. So on November 16th, 4 desperate students from the Wuxi Institute of Arts and Technology went on a killing spree. Some people call it the Wuxi massacre. The students protested their school for coercing them to work in a sweatshop for 16 days a week and 30 days consecutively, and also maliciously withholding their diploma if they don't cooperate. And one of the students wrote a letter explaining their motives and said that he's willing to sacrifice himself to raise awareness of labor issues. I covered this topic in my Thursday's program. So if you want to get the details of what happened in Wuxi, watch my program on Thursday, which is the 21st of November. Now, his message, the student's message, has a reverberating effect among students and laborers in other areas. Handwritten flyers titled like a letter to the people of the nation, calling for the overthrow of Chinese Communist Party, have been widely distributed in densely populated labor markets in southern China, around the Guangdong area. So I have some images of them for you. So you have seen these handwritten messages, like for this one, a letter to the people of China. So they have been showing up in southern China. And and they and it was reported that vocational school students in Guangzhou organized themselves. It started from them. Um, they organized themselves in dormitories and hand wrote these flyers and distribute them. Now, vocational school, the school, the Wuxi uh, Institute of Arts and Technology was a vocational school years ago, and I think it has been elevated to, it's still a vocational school. It teaches people how to make, I mean, that Wuxi school teaches people how to make the yixing, the Chinese clay pot. Um, and so it was a school that's focused on making these art crafts. So students in the vocational schools in southern China reacted to that mass killing. So they put out these flyers, handwritten flyers, in Guangzhou and some other in some other regions. Now, the flyers openly state that commemorating the victims of the Wuxi massacre means overthrowing the system that indirectly caused their death. The letters called on workers, students, and the people nationwide to take action and urge the overthrow of the Communist Party. And that's very direct. They're not shying away from their message. And according to a post on X, because these images are posted on Twitter. So students who signed the letter as Guangzhou's social revolutionary or revolutionaries reveal that they're vocational school students who have been paying close attention to domestic mass killing incidents. They acknowledge that Chinese society is not like a giant pressure cooker ready to explode. And they said, under the CCP's rule, no one can escape. And so here's what they wrote. They said, quote, "We vocational school students are at the bottom of the bottom, on the fringes of society. We are the expendable workforce, the fuel for factories, and subjects of the CCP's enduring endless sufferings." And they said, and continue to say, the regime used to exploit us in the name of communist ideology, but in reality, it was for the enrichment of its bureaucrats. Now it is promoting bureaucratic capitalism. And then it says, fellow citizens, it's time for us to rise up and resist. And the students, that's what the students wrote. And so these students, think about it, they are about to enter factories, right? I mean, they are, after graduation, they're going to work in these workshops or craft shops to make these these whatever they're making, potteries or ceramics. So they're concerned about their well-being, or their work condition at those workshops after learning what the students in Wuxi, went through. And these students have also heard from their senior class, members of their senior classes about the work conditions. And what they've heard is they're as bad as the condition in Wuxi. So they proclaimed, they said, the sweatshops in the Pearl River Delta are a global human rights disgrace. Right? We know the Pearl River Delta is the area in Guangzhou where 20% of China's export is based in. So they say the sweatshops in the Pearl River Delta are a global human rights disgrace. And the students said, we decided not to become the next killers and certainly not to be slaves of the government. So we organized ourselves in the dormitories to write and distribute flyers, and the emotions were high. And they concluded with a call to action: join forces to overthrow the Communist Party and build a new life. Now, what's shocking is that these handwritten flyers that calling for the overthrow of the Communist Party has appeared not just on school campus or campuses, but also appeared in labor markets across southern China. And they went on to say, the Chinese people must stand up today, speak your truth. Don't let others speak for you anymore, one flyer declared, and included with the slogans, long live the people, long live the workers, down with the Communist Party, down with the government-protected capitalists. Now, this movement has spread to inner provinces. Chongqing high school students were inspired and took action too. They also distributed these handwritten flyers, which can be seen in dormitory and spots, outside, right? And the high school students in Chongqing explained that they avoided using printers so that they won't be tracked. They handwrote the posters with the left hands, so that the handwritings cannot be traced. And the students are very strategic about their move. So when asked, why not organize a white paper style protest? Let me come back. So, people ask them, why don't you organize a white paper movement type of protest? And these students responded, they said, no, in the current semi-closed school environment, distributing flyers and small group activities or publicity are more effective than holding large assemblies. And they said, we hope people don't underestimate our momentum. And they said, we won't become isolated warriors, calling for more people to stand up. And they said, success doesn't have to come from us, but we must raise our voices. And finally, they declared, we're not afraid of the enemy's threats. Guess who the enemy is? And they said, we want more domestic and international advocates for democracy to hear us. I mean, I was amazed by how clear-headed these students are. I mean, these are high school students. They're, 16-year-old, 15-year-old, 17-year-old. But they're very clear, very strategic about what they want to accomplish. And then listen to this one. This says, stand up and refuse to be slaves. We don't want reforms. We want revolution. It really struck me about how clear-headed they are. In the past, and every time, when CCP, ran into this type of opposition, or if they sensed some kind of opposition like this, they will make some compromises by promising reforms, right? Every time, this is the trick CCP has used to fool the rest of us. I mean, the rest of the world, by promising some liberty or some freedom and some reforms. But the Chinese young people are very clear. We don't want reforms. We want revolution. We want a complete revolution. We don't want a modified version of the CCP. No. And they're very clear about that. I am very, very encouraged by what I saw. So the flyer also commented on the recent rise of violence in public spaces. And it says, in fact, the capitalist communist government, they call the Chinese government the capitalist communist government. And they say that government is the only undeniable culprit. And this system is a machine that produces tragedies. And the flyer calls for rekindling the enthusiasm from the white paper movement 2 years ago. And it says, rebuild up the strength of solidarity, starting with ourselves. So, now, this is not the first time the Chinese citizens have called to end the communist regime. We heard it during the Foxconn employee walkout. Remember 2 years ago in in Zhengzhou, I think it was in November, about this time in 2022, there was a massive employee walkout during the lockdowns in Zhengzhou at the Foxconn facility. And at the time, we've heard people, shouting slogan, down with the CCP. And also during the white paper movement, we've also heard, I think it was in Shanghai, someone shouted, and CCP. However, this time, the call to end the Communist Party is significantly different from the previous times or from before. And the four differences. The first one is it's more organized. It appears in the form of flyers and letters addressed to the nation, rather than in isolated protests and demonstrations. Number two, it's no longer anonymous, as the flyers are clearly signed, some by China's revolutionaries and others by Guangzhou's revolutionaries, right? So that's the second difference. Third is, while chanting down with the Communist Party, the protesters directly target the CCP's rule. They explicitly point out that the CCP is the cause of all sufferings of the Chinese people. This is also a change. Number four, they gave a clear call to action message, telling people to rise up and resist, take action, change the world, and build a new life. We have not seen this before. So there's clearly a change from all the protests we've seen, in the past. So in short, this movement is more than an emotional outburst arising from massive suffering. Instead, it's a conscious political action based on a clear vision. So it's not difficult to imagine the shock waves this has sent to Zhongnanhai, the CCP leadership compound, and the terror it has instilled in the leaders. One can only imagine the bigger political storm this might trigger in the near future. So now let me talk about CCP's response. On November 14th, this was before this kind of handwritten flyers appeared. So on November 14th, China's Ministry of Public Security held a press conference warning people against the dissemination of gun-making instructions online, stating that such activities would result in criminal prosecution. Because there have been people, sharing information on how to make guns. However, this announcement sparked widespread discussions. It actually caused more people to discuss, to have a discussion on the subject. And people definitely noted the regime's fear. And so other people remarked, water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it, right? I mean, water is usually a metaphor meaning the people, and the boat is the government. So they say water can carry a boat, but can also overturn it. And some Chinese discussed online how to divide the tasks. So they're like, okay, if you don't let us make guns, so we're going to divide the tasks among people and each do a smaller part and then collaborate to make guns. I mean, these discussions are certainly scary. And then a week later, on November 21st, I think that's after these handwritten notes have appeared. Wang Xiaohong, the Minister of Public Security, hosted a video conference with his subordinates across the country to call on to address public security issues. And according to the press release, his speech had several highlights. I just summarized, I think there are 5 points. Number one is he told the local police force across the country to take charge. He told them, quote, to take the initiative to assume responsibility, act proactively, and collaborate actively. Now, those of us who we know how to read these meeting minutes, because these jargon tells us that the local police force is not very actively taking charge. They're probably a little too laid back because they don't know how to handle it. I mean, they're scared themselves too. So that's why, the minister has to emphasize, you guys need to take the initiative to assume, to be responsible, to act proactively, and to collaborate actively. Well, there are a lot of active. Yeah. So they mean they're very passive. And the second point from his speech is, he said to focus on two areas. One, identifying and resolving conflicts and disputes. And two, addressing and rectifying safety hazards. Everything is about putting out fire, right? Identify conflicts and disputes before they erupt, and also addressing and rectifying safety hazards. Probably, once you identify those troublemakers, quote unquote troublemakers, and then you want to rectify them, I don't know, lock them up. That's what he's implying. And thirdly, he said, fully take advantage of the new policing model that integrates control mechanisms with big data to implement their action. So this suggests that they will monitor people more closely using their surveillance apparatus and big data. Number 4, he said, he specifically mentioned a winter action. There is, I think, a winter action being organized. And he also gave a time frame of their work. He wants his police force to focus on this winter and next spring. This suggests that they're not looking for the long term. They must have felt the urgent threat. They must feel the imminent threat and the urgent need to ensure stability in the next 4 to 5 months. So he's not talking about stability for the long term. He did not mention any of that. He mentioned, first of all, a winter action or a winter task force, and then put the focus on this winter and next spring. That tells me they're really worried. They worry about the short term. Number 5, he stressed the importance of adhering to the Fengqiao experience, Fengqiao 经验. The Fengqiao experience is a strategy that Mao Zedong came up with in the early 1960s that centered on mobilizing the masses and strengthening the dictatorship over class enemies. Basically, it's calling the masses to spy on each other. Okay, so based on Wang's speech, I think the CCP feels very threatened by the latest social development in China. I think they realize the winter, things were getting uglier and the winter will be very difficult. So that they're putting out all their efforts trying to get it under control in the winter and possibly into the spring. But I don't think the 5 tactics that Wang had spelled out will work, because people have already disabled local governments and also their functions. Let me give you an example to explain why I say local governments has been dysfunctional or have lost their control. People who visited the southern city of Chaozhou in Guangdong province were surprised to see the city in a quasi-lockdown mode. I actually have pictures. People were very surprised to see the city overnight are all closed. And tourists who looked for restaurants to eat couldn't find them. And you'd never imagine how it had happened. Well, on November 20th, the municipal government issued a notice announcing a citywide fire safety, environmental protection, and sanitary inspection. The notice said that businesses deemed non-compliant were required to suspend production or business temporarily, and violations would result in a fine of 50,000 yuan. That's saying that if you're not compliant, your business will be shut down and you'll be fined 50,000 yuan. Following the announcement, a large number of businesses and enterprises in Chaozhou immediately closed their doors. They want to avoid inspections. Some said that 98% of the businesses were closed. And not just the mom and pop shops, all businesses, including international brands like McDonald's and KFC. People say the situation is worse than the COVID lockdowns, because during COVID, you at least have some supermarkets or some essential businesses open. And they say like it's worse than COVID. And tourists and local people complain that they can't buy anything. And this led to the city issuing an emergency notice the next day, demanding businesses and shops not to deliberately close without a legitimate reason or refuse inspections. Despite this, by the evening of November 21st, right, that's the next day of the day, because the original notice came out on the 20th. So the 21st, they issued another notice, but that evening, and also the morning of November 22nd, 90% of the shops in Chaozhou's historic district remain closed. They continue to continuing to refuse inspections. So on November 22nd, the businesses in Chaozhou received another notice stating that they were not allowed to arbitrarily close or suspend operations. Deliberately closing business to avoid inspections would still result in inspections being conducted as usual. It almost sounds like the inspectors would just open the door. I mean, if you close, they're gonna just force you to open your door and do the inspection. I don't know what would happen. They say if you remain closed, we're still going to do our inspection. And then the government would conduct even more thorough and stringent inspections with more severe penalties for violations. So they basically intimidate the business. Like, if you remain closed, we're gonna do more inspections on you and give you a bigger fine. Now, here's the situation. With the central government funding being reduced, local governments have been granted more power to figure out solutions on their own, to look for more money. So basically, the implication is clear. The central government basically has been telling the local governments, make your own way forward, even if it means fighting tooth and nail. So increased inspections and fines have been a revenue-making business for local governments. Exorbitant fines have become increasingly common. So, for example, I think the most scandalous scandal was an elderly peasant who made 14 yuan from selling substandard celeries in the market, received 2 separate fines totaling 100,000 yuan from the local market regulatory authorities. He made 14 yuan from selling bad celeries, but he was fined 100,000 yuan. I don't think this man has 100,000 yuan, but that's the kind of this kind of quote unquote regulatory supervisions have been going on in the commercial space. So that's why people reacted, right? People reacted by closing down their business, and people put on signs, and people put on signs say business closed because I had a fight with my wife. People put on all kinds of excuses on the closing business notice, and some said it's a bad day for me because I fear ghosts. like I almost saying like I'm superstitious. I fear it's not a good day for me to do business because I fear ghosts. And then the next door business said, I closed my business because my neighbor said that he fears ghosts. So do I. So I mean, people just put out these random notes or notes with random excuses to explain why they closed the business. But I think this trend is likely to spread across other cities in mainland China, where the collapse of fiscal revenues is forcing local governments to recoup their deficits by extracting wealth directly from local businesses. But people will that decision will effectively shut down the city overnight, as we've seen in Chaozhou. But if you really think about it, this is scary because one inspection notice from the government has completely wiped out all commercial activities in the city. What does that mean? That means the local governments can't do anything, right? They've already lost their power because people don't care. I mean, in the old days, if people still want to make some money, so they don't want to shut down their business, they still want to make money, so they remain open, even though they don't like the government, taking money from them. But now it's so bad that they would rather not do any business than having their government come in and take their money away through, some kind of a fake inspection. So what can you do? This is very similar to the random acts of violence. When people are fearless, when people don't care, then that has effectively disabled the government because the government can't do anything. So now let's talk about the status of Xi Jinping's power. We've discussed the signs that Xi Jinping's power has been weakened, particularly his control over the Chinese military, right? I did a number of programs on that. We came up with a conclusion based on a number of facts. One is that some of his close allies and loyal associates have been either removed or demoted. Some of the official jargons defining his supreme leadership status has disappeared from official narratives, such as the Xi Jinping thoughts. That's officially removed. The app to study Xi Jinping thoughts has been disabled. So that's the second sign. And then also his policies, we've witnessed again a 180-degree turn on his policies. The abandonment of wolf warrior diplomacy when it comes to Western adversaries, and also the sudden onset of economic stimulus programs. And also things or jargons that weren't his favorite have returned to official narratives. Things that he didn't like now have returned, such as the expression 民主集中制, which means a centralized or a collective democratic process. It's a term that it was a term used by Deng Xiaoping to mean a group of leaders sharing power in decision making. That's not something that Xi Jinping is crazy about, but it has returned to official narratives in CCP publicity. But then we've also seen Xi Jinping attending APEC summit, G20 summit, holding bilateral talks with other heads of state as if he's still in power. He's still fulfilling his duty as the number one guy in China. So what's the status of CCP power struggle? Where does he stand? Or how are we going to interpret everything in front of our eyes, right? On one hand, his power seems to be reduced or weakened. On the other hand, he's still doing what he used to do. Here's my analysis of the situation. There are a lot of people within the party who oppose Xi Jinping. And whether it's due to this opposition or his health problems, Xi Jinping has compromised. So he has stepped back. He has made significant compromises due to this opposition and possibly due to his health problems, as we have witnessed in the above mentioned changes. There's no doubt that Xi Jinping's power has been weakened. However, no one who has challenged him has come up with a plan or a solution to save the regime. Nor does anyone who opposes him wants to take on Xi Jinping's role, because they understand the damage has been done and it's impossible to save the regime. With everything that's happening now, I mean, it might have been different 2 years from now, 2 years ago, even a year ago, but with everything that's happening, with what's happening in the US, right? You have Donald Trump, who's elected and who's about to levy a heavy tariffs on Chinese imports. And I mean, with everything that's happening, no one is interested in his job. And the opponents, now think about it, his opponents within the party are also people who have benefited from the regime. So they're not necessarily interested in overthrowing the regime. So the problem of the CCP has right now is that there's no one leader, including Xi Jinping, knows how to fix the problems, how to get themselves out of the predicament that they're in. So, with that said, Xi Jinping has remained in power. Those who oppose him can't remove him because they don't have a solution and they haven't found a replacement. So that makes Xi Jinping still the most powerful leader, even though his power has been reduced or weakened. So I think the CCP leadership is currently stuck in a delicate and fragile balance of impasse. So somehow it has remained intact for the outside world, but because they understand if a drastic change is made, whether you get rid of Xi Jinping, have someone else, it may cause the downfall of the regime. So they all fear that. Even those who oppose Xi Jinping fear that. So they're still trying to figure out what to do. Or maybe they haven't found this solution yet. So they're stuck in this perfectly delicate, fragile balance. Somehow it's balanced, but it's a form of impasse. For now, he will continue to play the role as the leader while he and the rest of the CCP leadership tries to figure out what to do, and they will continue to fight. While they don't have a clue on what to do, the Chinese people will become more and more clear about the future they want. As we've seen in the open letters written by those students, the Chinese people will become more and more clear about the future they want and the direction China should head into. So if no one within the CCP has the vision or the courage to end the CCP's rule and steer China in the right direction, then the regime will be overthrown sooner or later, as the call to end the CCP is already heard loud and clear. Because if the leadership doesn't have the guts and the vision to make a decision, then people will make the decision for them, right? And we just don't know how long that process will be. But during the process, CCP's grip on Chinese society, their governance, will be gradually weakened, as we've seen in the city of Chaozhou. I mean, one citywide inspection caused the entire city to stop function. It caused the suspension of all commercial activities in the city. Who could have imagined that? So we just don't know how fast things will move. I think this winter will be very difficult for people in Zhongnanhai. Now, if you think about it, it's only been a week since the Wuxi campus massacre happened. But within that week, so much has developed, right? I mean, based on the notes, the handwritten notes I shared with you. Meanwhile, there's an outburst of auto-related incidents in China. The first time we saw this car ramming incident was November 11th. And yesterday, 3 car ramming incidents occurred. The first was in Foshan City in Guangdong. And then the second one was in Liaoyang City in Liaoning Province, which is in the northeast. And the third is in Yangzhou in Jiangsu Province on the coast, on the east coast. There are similar incidents where people, these are random acts of violence where people want to take revenge against society. I mean, it's very sad, but that's where the Chinese society is right now. I think every week, I just couldn't believe how much has developed in the past week and two. So we should definitely keep a close eye on what comes after this. I think the CCP's judgment is right. They worry about this winter. So if they can survive this winter, they probably can survive this crisis. If not, things can develop very quickly for them. All right, that's all. All right, wow, it's a lot of information. But I feel very, very encouraged by the notes that the students shared. I mean, those are amazing. All right, let me quickly go through the super chats. Let's see. Charles Womack, how do I help the people of China to free themselves of the CCP? Give them encouragement. Share their information on X. So if you're on Twitter, you will see their the Chinese students use X as a platform to send out their information. So a lot of these information are shared on Twitter. So you could help them spread the information if you can. That would be a great form of support. And thank you for your support to me. All right, let's see. All right, let's see. Chinese want freedom? Yes. Okay. All right. Oh, here's a question. Will Parker. Question from Joe Never inspiring. But how does this end up any different from the Tiananmen Square massacre? Oh, this is very different from Tiananmen Square massacre. The Tiananmen Square pro-democracy movement in 1989 had large groups of students and citizens gathering in public squares, and usually it's in front of the government, and demanding freedom. And people gather. Students went on hunger strike in these public places, and they stay, and they don't leave. So that their presence threatened the regime, and the regime, used the excuse of public order, or you're blocking public space. We need to drive these students away, and so it was the government had an excuse. They said, well, you guys illegally occupy these public space, and you shut down traffic. But this form, the white paper movement, and I think the Chinese have learned from that lesson. So they're very smart, and so it's almost like a decentralized approach to public protest. And in one of the notes that I read, in the students even saying that we don't even want to do what the white paper movement did. They say the white paper movement was actually much smaller in scale when compared with the 1989 student movement, but it's still too big for the Chongqing high school students. They want to do even smaller. I think what they're focusing on is people's. I think what they're focusing on is people's thinking, because if every Chinese is no longer afraid of the CCP and they speak up, and they speak the truth, that will effectively disable the government, right? So I think the students have learned from 1989. So they're very smart about it. They're very strategic and smart about it. So they focus on these small scale publicity. They call small scale publicity, to put out these notes everywhere throughout the city so people read about it. Because the Chinese people are all thinking the same thing. It's not like you're telling people something like so forward, so far fetched that the people don't know what you're talking about. Everyone is thinking the same thing, but they cannot communicate amongst themselves because the social media is monitored. And so by using these handwritten flyers, then they're effectively organizing people through their thinking, through their mindset. And that's empowering people. That's empowering people without a significant form of organization. And you can't even stop people. How are you gonna stop people from writing some handwritten notes and put it up, on a tree or on a billboard? Anyone can do that. Anyone can do that, and anyone can do that at anywhere. And the government is not able to stop people, because if you start doing print shop, if you start doing printing, then that's a more of an organized environment activity, and they can ask the print shop to monitor you. So the fact that it's handwritten notes, anyone can do it. They can't stop you. So this is more threatening. Actually, this is more threatening than the 1989 student movement. Mint creative gifts and ideas. Like, if CCP collapses, do you think those countries whose governments, such as Singapore, who is actively acting like CCP propagandist, will they go down with them? I don't think so. What I've learned is people in today's political climate switch sides so fast. I have talked to people, about 20 years ago, or even maybe 10 years ago, I asked some, diehard CCP loyalists, and I asked them this question. I said, what if CCP, is put on trial one day? What are you going to do? And they say, oh, it's not a problem. I'll just switch to the other side and start condemning the CCP. People are so practical today. I find it hard. People, we've seen people on the left who all of a sudden can switch to the right, or at least switch to the middle overnight. So it's almost like publicity. I think the profession of publicity, public relations or publicity, it used to be a profession that I'm proud of, because I used to be in public, but now I'm a little ashamed of what we do, people in PR, because it's like you could just adopt a completely different set of a narrative overnight, as if nothing matters. Like what you feel strongly in your heart does not matter. And so I do not think these government will feel anything. If CCP goes down, they will join the side to say, yeah, let's condemn CCP. Let's expose what the CCP has done to harm all of us. That's what happened to those countries. If someone who actually truly believes that the CCP is good, they actually truly believe that and actually follow CCP all the way to its grave, then I'm saying that, I'm amazed by their stupidity, but at least they're true to how they feel. They're true to their thinking, to their feeling, although that thinking is nonsensical. But I don't expect these people will defend CCP in any way. No, they will not. They will jump the ship the last minute before it sinks. Trust me. We've seen that. All right. Let me see. Questions? Any questions? Wow, there's a lot of great discussions here. I just don't see any questions. Oh, Here's a question. I think Will Parker is helping me gathering questions. Question from N544 Anon. Why are they saying Elon Musk has a small government in China? I did a program on the relations between Elon Musk and the Chinese government. It was, I think, a week ago, on Tuesday. And I think that I was surprised by the lack of views on that program. You should take a look at, if you want to understand the relationship between Elon Musk and the Chinese government, take a look at that program. It's very in depth. I covered so much points in that program. Someone asked me if I was tired after that program. I told them yes, I was exhausted. That was last Tuesday, November the 19th. Yeah, take a look at that program. All right, let's see. Alan Mandel, you previously said international media are in Beijing. I noticed Bloomberg on X reports China news in a neutral or most positive framework. Would the US media face retribution if CCP falls? Very good question. I think some of the US media, particularly the ones that have clearly done the dirty work for the CCP, will face retribution when CCP falls. I think Chinese people will not let them go. You know, media like the New York Times. I mean, come on, the New York Times is doing the dirty work. I mean, the fact that New York Times is allowed, its website, its Chinese website is allowed in China, or parts of it is allowed in China, smells fishy, to me. That means they have colluded with the CCP. Otherwise, how could they allowed the Chinese edition of New York Times in China? Bloomberg, all Western media that are allowed in China have to compromise, have to kowtow to the CCP. Otherwise, they will be kicked out. Grandma Jim, is that grandma? Oh, Grandpa Jim, sorry. Grandpa, do average Chinese people know how much better life is for people in Taiwan? Some do and some don't. Yeah. Some happy freight dog. The Elon Musk program was very good. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Thank you for noticing that. Will Parker, comment from Crypto Nobody. I have in-laws living in China. They have barely make ends meet. Yes, it reminds me of the fall of the USSR. Well, thank you. I'll take a few more questions. Johns. What countermeasures will the CCP do to prevent this trend you are describing? They would just be more, they're just doing everything they can, like what the Minister of the Public Security said. They're going, really hardcore to put everyone. They're trying to, identify all the troublemakers using AI and big data to identify all the troublemakers before they become. They're doing these grassroots home visits to identify those people who don't have family, don't have a spouse, don't have children, who don't have income, or people who are unhappy about their relationship, unhappy about their job. They're trying to use grassroots staff to identify those people and probably register them in their database, and then monitor their activities, because everyone uses like these social apps like WeChat. So everything they do, their life is transparent to the government. So the government can watch them 24/7. And they hopefully they want to use this to identify people before they strike. That's what they're doing. Alan Mendel, well, thank you for the support. Hi, thank you for providing the first and second most insightful program. My students of critical thinking appreciates it too. Oh, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan. Okay, that's all. I'll take one more question. Semtex86. How much power does India have over China? They export a lot of food to China. Then why does China antagonize them so much? Well, the two sides have reached some kind of agreement over the border disputes. I think the CCP has realized its crisis, so it has tried to. I don't think India is what the CCP is most concerned about at this point. All right, so I'll end it here. I wish everyone a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me, and thank you all to those who supported me financially. Thank you. All right, bye.